What we do here is we go with a staff presentation first. Next, we go with public comment.
So once we get feedback from this group, we'll modify the regulations as needed, and then it'll be posted, and then we'll go out for a 2-week public review.
What I'm going to do is I'll do public comment, and then when the board is able to speak, they may ask you some questions.
The New Roots Community Farm, in just 2 years, next slide please, has created an amazing proof that community gardens work. In just the last summer alone, about 1,000 pounds of fresh produce were being harvested each week. So that's about a $200 savings per month per household. That's 85 households saving about $200 worth a month. And the community farm is just one piece in a number of different community food projects.
My name is Diane Moss, and I run a nonprofit called Project New Village. Agreement with SCDC, with property in Mount Hope. The lease is dependent upon the city approving, if you will, that it can be used for a community garden. There's an opportunity for some of our neighbors to become certified growers so that neighbors can sell to neighbors and we can have access to fresh fruits and vegetables in southeastern San Diego. I just would like to say that there's a variety of us from all across the city who have come here supporting community gardens. And if you would just raise your hand if you're here supporting community gardens.
Yes, this ordinance language, what the CMT suggested actually went beyond what we would want, and it's awesome. So I think, speaking on behalf of the residents, we are very happy and enthusiastic in you being able to support what's on your paper.
Okay, my name is Carol Morrison. I represent the Tierra Santa Lutheran Church Community Garden. In a year, we've produced over 1,000 pounds of vegetables to go to outreach organizations. Community gardens isn't just about community gardens. It's not about just growing the food. It's about bringing the community together. We bring kids together and teach them how to grow. It's not even just about the growing part. It's about them coming together as a community and having something to do.
And the main important thing about community garden, and it's not just growing food. First of all, we are growing community. Because we are providing food for San Diego, and we are providing food for our family at the same time.
This is like going to a movie. At this point, we've closed the public comment, so you have to watch what takes place among the chairs. Now, like any movie, the plot may get different. You know, it's like Godzilla versus Frankenstein. It may go a direction that you may not like, but you can't participate. So this is sort of, focus shifts over to the board here.
From Norton Go. I'm Jim with Normal Heights Community Planning Group. We're basically in favor. We have 2 community gardens already operating in the community, and we're about to authorize one of those in Parkland. So in general, we're in favor. We're anxious to see what the details are of the ordinance and hope that the process can be remedied to make it faster and easier for gardens to get established.
Thank you, Jim. Doug, and I believe your group made a motion.
Yes, we strongly support the ordinance, and we'd like to see it put into place as fast as possible. I don't see anything on the costs here, and I know there was a $5,000 permit, and I hope that's expunged with the draft ordinance.
Tag team here.
I'm Sam Mendoza, alternate for Otay Mesa, and I support, and we do support the community gardening, and we currently have one in our neighborhood.
I want to say up front, I like the idea of community gardens, so don't, no tar and feathers or anything. But there are some culpability and responsibility issues that I don't see addressed, and I don't think we should just blanket endorse this without getting some of the right answers. Who's responsible for the permit? Who's responsible for maintaining the garden? Who's responsible for insurance? Is there any requirement for insurance? Who pays for the water? One of the recommendations in this group was no water meter. So we're providing free water. Who pays for the water? There was a comment about on-site sales may be allowed in residential and commercial zones. Would that be a competition against already existing farmers markets that are in place? These are questions that I think need to be answered before we rush to agriculture on Ravana and come to a community garden with just everybody going, woo-hoo. The idea is we need some responsibility. the one that recommends deleting requirement for fencing and locking it up. That was on the summary sheet here. Those are all questions that need to be answered from over there.
As far as responsibility, responsible person is the property owner. They own the property, whoever the property owner, whether it's the city or a private individual, they take responsibility. Water is never a free issue. There is no free water in the city. Someone is paying for that water from their water meter, okay? So there is a responsible party, it's the person on there. There is a new permit established, a community garden permit. It's a process one. It's a no fee. To answer the other gentleman's question, it won't be a $5,000 fee. There are revocation authorities. If within a 12-month period there are more than 2 code violations, that permit can be revoked.
I heard one man say something about this sort of being a job for him, and when I think of a community garden, I think of a community garden as something that people do in addition to other things. I don't think of it as being their sole source of income, and I would think that people who want to be gardeners maybe need to have gardens in other places of the county. There are a lot of rural areas that could really service people better for a full-time gardening if in other areas within the county.
Hold on, I'm ready.
I see that last comment didn't get it. But you know, if you're going to be a farmer, I think you should be able to go to farmland.
Okay, well, I don't agree with that. If the only job a person can find is growing carrots, then I think they should grow carrots.
Doug.
Our community planning group over a year ago took a motion in support of community gardens. My only reservation about the proposed regulations is the fact that they are a process one, which doesn't give an opportunity for community input, and I'd like some feedback on that.
Mr. Chair, let me address you.
I and my community extremely support community gardens.
That Dan did. I am fully supportive of the motions that were made by Code Monitoring Team. I think they loosen up the requirements just enough to really make sense for what a community garden is trying to do. The one exception is the sales in residential zones. We don't allow that under...
If you don't have allow community gardens in commercial, industrial, and residential, we probably don't have a place for them. So we support the community gardens, and we'll look forward to hearing about the sales in the residential area. I'm assuming it's just in the community garden area.
I'm in support of community gardens. I
voted last night in a unanimous fashion to support the community gardens.
Ocean Beach is in full support of the community garden concept. The process one is too low, Dan. It needs to be something that's accountable to the leadership of the elected people at the lowest level, which would be the community planning group. So there needs to be discretion at that community planning group level. That's important in an urban area specific to Ocean Beach or other communities where there will be impacts around where these community gardens will be formed.
You can answer later, but on the permit sale only of products grown on site, would that include anything that would be cooked, canned, or processed in any way from these garden products? And how would that be controlled? I also agree with some of the other board members that process one, at least initially, is too low. And what consideration in the residential areas has been taken for traffic impacts? Thank you.
Yeah, at the Pierre Santa Community Council, we voted to support this unanimously also. I do have a couple questions for Dan. The first one is, I know there's been a reduction in manpower at code monitoring. So just like there's a reduction in manpower, a lot of things in the city. So I guess I'm questioning, and it goes back to some of my colleagues on the other side, what they're about the five-year issue. I think that's too long, and I also think that the code monitoring team needs to realize that they actually have the manpower to actually monitor what they're saying they're going to try to monitor. And specifically Tierra Santa, that I see no reason why we couldn't have a permitted community garden in that open space. I'll pretend not all of it, but say something that's reasonably close to a water meter, or something close to the community, not out in the middle of an MHPA or far from the community, but something close, and there's so much open space, by not including it at all, you're really limiting what these people can do. The reality is we should find a way to make this permit process free. There shouldn't be any cost for this process. These people are trying to raise fruit to supplement their income that they may not have, and we need to find a way for the city to account for that.
Rancho Bernardo is extremely supportive. This is new territory for us, so to speak. We agree on the process one issue, it's too low. Also on the manpower, we talked about that because we recognized for some time the decrease in staff. So overall though, as we proceed, I know our community, because this is so new, is going to have a lot of questions, but we really commend everybody's efforts, and we're extremely, like I said, really supportive.
I agree that 5 years is too long for the first one. Maybe it should be 3 years on this thing here. I think it needs a permanent fence. I think it needs a water meter. It needs to have a locked gate. Items should be central in the parcel, because that was some of the questions. I'm in conformance with them about code enforcement. It's getting less and less, and I can tell you this is not going to even make their top 10
discussions within the community. We don't see the validity of allowing the sale of this produce, period, especially on site. This is something that we've always been under the impression that was for the benefit of the grower to support and enhance their family food table, and not to make some sort of cash crop out of it. And the next thing I want to just cover and back off on this is we did want it in the center of the property because we realized that the center and the back of the property abuts the back of somebody else's property who may only have a 5-foot backyard. And some of the stuff when you're doing farming or gardening doesn't smell too well, and yeah, we got to worry about vermin and all that other kind of stuff too. Deleted the requirement for a gate and a locking and a fence, and left that up to the people doing the gardening. If you're concerned, if the gardeners were concerned about their produce being stolen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they would put a fence up. If that wasn't a concern in their particular neighborhood, they wouldn't have to go through that extra expense. So that's what that is. Now, a personal observation over the years. Community gardens are needed because urban planners forgot the lessons of community planning and reduced the size of lots and required open spaces for yards, which allowed families gardens. In their misguided quest for more dense and taller housing structures, which tend to reduce the amount of sun reaching the very little open space that's left.
There's issues that we need to be addressed. Some of them have been stated. One is the fencing. These sites definitely need to be secured. We started out looking at this as a community gardens. Now we're looking at it as equivalent of a farmer's market where there is issues. It needs to be clarified.
And for us, any attempt to try to put gardens in our canyons in open space for us would be a slippery slope, and it would not be fun to be fighting all these people. But I should let you all know, North Park fought, putting sewers in canyons, so we will fight for our canyons. So
what we've done now is conclude board comment and questions. Dan, if you wish to respond, if get everybody's attention.
First part of it I mentioned earlier is we're creating a new community garden permit. It's valid for no more than 5 years. I've heard people say 3 years would be appropriate. So within that, there is a requirement that if there are more than 2 violations within any 12-month period, that permit may be revoked. We don't have an exact date for council. We have a tentative date for planning commission for the 28th of April.
Okay, here's where we at then. If you're going to planning commission in April, that's this is the only chance the CPC will be able to pass a motion.
So keep it simple, Leo. Support the base language developed by Mr. Joyce, and support all the modifications by the code monitoring team, with the exception of no sales in residential homes.
Okay, but before we do this, the whole group has to approve the motion to sever and vote item by item.
No, we have to vote on whether to divide the question.
Yeah.
Yes. Before we vote to sever, I would like to hear the motion, the original motion, slowly and clearly, so we know what we're voting to sever.
motion was for CPC to support the original base document prepared by Mr. Joyce and to support all of the motions by the code monitoring team with the exception of not allowing sales in residential zones and the addition of a courtesy notice to property owners within 300 feet.
So we're there. So what we're going to do now is sever the motion. The first part of the motion will be to support the base language. I believe the first part, to support community garden, the base language of the ordinance. And then the second part will go item by item on the handout that you have. Okay, so second. Okay, so the motion by Tracy, second by Dennis. The motion is to put an amendment in, and the effect will be to make it a process 2 and the permit for 3 years. But,
and exclude residential.
Exclude residential sales.
Exclude residential sales.
That comes up lower in the.
that comes up a little later in the one we just severed.
I was just trying to put everything in here.
Why don't we wait on since we've already approved the severance?
As most of you know, I process permits through the city, and I think have the privilege of doing the cheapest process 2, which the fees were about $3,800. The deposit and the processing. Process 3, I submitted one last week for a charter school in an existing building, and for K through 8. And the deposit check was $8,616. I think we have to decide, do we want this to enhance the city and your communities and your neighbors and whatever? And so we have to stay with process 1, I think, with a courtesy notice. That your neighbors will then know. I know what you're saying, Tracy, but we get notice about the selling.